Going live on custom streaming. Use starting music. Go. Streaming.
Hello.
Starting music. Go.
What's going on with that music, Sean?
I think it's playing through multiple streaming here.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. Cut the music. Hey, good
Cut the
evening,
music.
everybody. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Veterans Breakfast Club. I'm Todd DiPastino, the director of the Veterans Breakfast Club. We get together every Monday night at 7 p.m. to talk about all things related to the military experience, past and present. I'm here with my colleague, Sean Hall. Hello, Sean, our director of programming. How are you?
Evening, everybody. I'm great.
It is a balmy, sunny evening here in Pittsburgh in March, and we're very glad that it is. It's actually, I had to open up a window. I sit in Veterans Breakfast Club World Headquarters, which is my attic. And yes, I had somebody said, "Don't you hit your head when you stand up in your attic?" Yes, I do, but you have to be strategic about where you stand. And I try to make sure that I stand in the right place. So it's for the first time this winter, I'm opening the window up here because it's so nice. Tonight, we're just doing open conversation. And you know that we've made a pledge to do open conversation once a month. So although I have a few things here to bring up and talk about, I really want to take the lead from what you want to discuss. And I always want to start by inviting anybody who is here for the first time to say hello, to let us know who they are and maybe share a little bit about their service. I see that Chase Paulus is with us. He's a high school student who has a lot of military stories in his family, especially related to World War II, and is happy to share them. I see Barb Smith in Ohio. Daria Summers has joined us. Justin Miller in Dallas, and Nancy Smoyer, Don Nemchek, Bob Flage, Ray Brendel. Corky, how are you, Corky? Corky Romeo. Corky was a B-52 pilot, so if you want to ask him about flying a B-52, now's your chance. I see Larry Googans. Larry, good to see you guys. Rich Kensinger, of course. Gary Glick. Thank you very much, Bob. Jerry Augustine. How are you, Jerry? I'm going to start with you. How are you doing this evening?
We had 60-degree weather today.
Very nice.
It was beautiful up in New England.
Wonderful. And you have a group of veterans that go kayaking, right? Every week, every month?
Yeah, starting in May, I founded
Starting in May.
a veterans kayaking program for disabled veterans. And we're up to 50 to 55 disabled veterans that come.
That is remarkable.
Every Thursday, 9 o'clock in the morning, it starts every Thursday from May until October. And it's absolutely wonderful. It's backed by the Elks number 771. The Elks gives us a $6,000 grant to run the whole program, and it's free to disabled veterans and their families.
Now you are A, high energy, B, extremely athletic, C, extremely good shape. But what made you focus on kayaking as an activity?
In 2018, I was invited to do a race down the Connecticut River, and they needed an extra hand. And I said, geez, I've never been in a kayak, but I'll be glad to do it. And lo and behold, they put me in a double because it was the first time I was in a kayak. And the partner and I, we took second place overall in the 6-mile race down the Connecticut River.
Oh my gosh. I traveled with Jerry to Vietnam for 2 weeks, and I was I didn't know Jerry before he came on the trip, and I have to admit that I was a little bit scared, like you were going to make me do push-ups every morning or run up and down the stairs of the hotel or something like that. But you never did any of that, so thank you, Jerry.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hey,
But you're not going to believe this, but I'm training now to do the Empire State Building run-up one more time. It's coming up in October 8th this year, and I'm turning 80 July 29th, and I'm going to win the 80s division. There isn't an 80s division, but I'm going to be the first 80-year-old up there.
The competition isn't too. There's not
They
much
never stop.
competition. So, okay, you've got to tell people what this is. This is a race truly up to the top of the Empire State Building.
Yes. 1,576 stairs, 3 hallways, 176 landings, and I've done it 8 times.
Oh,
I started when I was 50, and I did it for 8 times. And I finally won the 50s division in 2001. And my best time was 14 minutes and 28 seconds.
2 minutes, 28 seconds. How many how many stories is it, Jerry?
It's 86 floors.
86. Can you
Yeah.
imagine running up 86 floors? I mean, at any age, let alone at age 80. How does one train for something like this?
I just started running again. I'm doing 4 miles every Sunday with another group. 4 of us are 80 years old, and we're doing hills. And I'll be training right through the summer. I'm going to lose about 10 pounds, and I'm really going to be dedicated. And I'm going to do this thing.
Oh, of course you will. Of
We have a
course you will.
challenger in the chat. Brad asked, "How do you train for that?"
Well, the year that I won it, I went to Las Vegas, and I stayed at the Hilton. There were 38 floors. And every morning for a week, I did 3 heats as fast as I could go. And I timed myself each morning, and I wrote it down. And every day I improved. The 38 floors, 3 heats. And when I went back to the Empire State Building the following Tuesday, I did a warm up from the basement to the first floor where the starting line was. And I says, "Oh my God, I can't even feel my legs. I'm in such good shape." And that's the year that I won. I beat 18 competitors from all over the world in the 50s division, and I won the 50s division.
I love it.
Yep.
I love it. Thank you, Jerry. We have another fellow Army Vietnam veteran here, Mark Spiridigliosi. Mark, I haven't seen you in a while. And I got to say, I was watching the news yesterday, I suppose, when I saw the news of a plane crash right near you in Lancaster. And then I saw the video of it, and it said it crashed in a parking lot of a retirement community. And I looked at it and thought, oh my gosh, that's Mark's retirement community. And it wasn't, but man, it's nearby and it looks just like it.
It sure does, and it was a very scary thing for those people there. What a miraculous happenstance where that plane went down in that parking lot, less than 20 feet from that building where the retirement people apartments were. Destroyed a bunch of cars, and now they didn't walk away, but nobody was killed, and that's the amazing thing.
I cannot believe nobody died in that plane crash. But it made me, I raced to my computer to look up where it was exactly and saw that it was Brethren Village, not Woodcrest Villa, which is
You
not
heard
too
me
far.
You would still hear me screaming and running. I'd have probably ended up being like the racing star Usain Bolt. I
Yeah.
would have passed. I would have passed the exit on the turnpike on my way to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, you would have given Jerry a run for his money. Right.
Yeah.
Hey, I see we have Luis Rodriguez with us. I don't remember seeing you here before. I just want to welcome you and you feel free to introduce yourself if you'd like.
Hello, yes. I happened to find the Veterans Breakfast Club about a week ago. Just called to see if you guys could introduce me to any World War II veterans. Because I do interviews with veterans and
Oh, yeah. No, why didn't we email you? I emailed you, or Sean did, right?
didn't receive the email, but
You did not.
no, not unfortunately.
We were in talks about getting you connected with
The
Julia
100
Parsons.
Yes, correct.
Got it. Yes. Let me, and I think I was having computer issues if you all recall last week. And I don't remember if I was able to share these pictures of Julia's birthday party. I guess now that I think of it, I did. This is Julia Parsons, turned 104 a couple weeks ago. Here she is at her birthday party. Jim Roberts, you were there. Wonderful birthday cake there. Here's a wonderful picture of her. And what I was going to tell people was, and do I say I pronounce your? Are you
Luis.
Luis?
Yes.
Um, I, I'm trying to think if she could talk over the phone. I think she can, but I'm not positive about that. Let me look into this. You'd find her totally fascinating.
Yeah,
She
it would be an incredible honor to speak with her.
Oh yeah, just to speak with her. I think you
Yes.
would enjoy it. Again, just turned 104. She was a code breaker in World War II,
Wow.
and she is like continues to be just a fascinating person. I think the photos I was not able to share last week were like this. We did a program with her on February 11th at BPMI, Bechtel Plant Machinery Incorporated, where she spoke. I think I did mention this to 350 employees there for 90 minutes. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. She was able to, talk about her code breaking work and answer questions, and it was just a delight to be with her. You could see how, engaged she was and engaged everybody was with her. So, um, we'd like you to put you in touch with her if that would work. I think Ed Cottrell would like to talk to you. I think we have a few people that we do want to put you in touch with. Louise, how do you do the interviews? Over the phone
Either over the phone or over Zoom,
or
whichever
over
is
Zoom?
best for the veteran,
Okay.
whatever is easiest for them.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Yes.
then that's great because Julia, Ed can do Zoom. We'll connect you for sure.
Thank you. I would be very grateful if y'all could help me out with that.
I will help you out with that. Now, how many interviews have you done?
Interviews overall, I've done about maybe 10 or 13 around there
And,
with veterans
and
from
why do
Vietnam, Korea, all that.
Oh, so you do all eras, huh?
Yes, I'm mainly focusing on World War II right now,
Right.
since these veterans are very old, are in
Yeah.
very advanced stages.
Yes.
But I'm very happy to interview veterans from any time period, really.
And why do you do it?
I do it because I think, well, for me, being able to speak with these veterans is just an incredible honor. There's really, it's an incredible privilege for me to hear these stories firsthand,
Yeah.
and then to be able to share these stories with my friends and try to educate other people on the sacrifice that these veterans have done is just a great honor for me to be able to share and educate
Yeah.
through my YouTube channel and other means. And it's just a very big passion of mine. So
And could you share your YouTube channel with us here in the chat?
yes, it's called Military History Unveiled. Um,
Military History Unveiled. Okay.
yes,
And if you want to put a link in the chat here,
sure, I'll post one a bit later.
people could check it out. And and I want to invite you to, anytime if you have a new interview or if you're ever looking for somebody to interview, please do not hesitate to let us know.
Thank
Because
you.
we're all about obviously encouraging veterans to share their stories, number
Yes,
one.
that's why I really appreciate what you guys do.
But we're also all about trying to connect people like you and me. I'm not a veteran, Sean's not a veteran, to veterans and get, have us help educate ourselves and in doing so educate the public. Just what you said, like sharing what you learn with your friends through social media, I think is a terrific thing.
Thank you. Yes, wholeheartedly agree with that
May I
message.
ask you how old you are?
I'm 16 years old.
You're 16. Holy mackerel. I wish I was that smart when I was 16. Um, what would you want to do when you grow up?
I'm not sure. I'd love to continue doing these interviews, but I'd perhaps like to do something that has a bit of history in it, but maybe not full history. So
Yeah.
perhaps economics, political science, something that I can use my education in history to to help me succeed in that area.
Yes. And you will undoubtedly figure that out and blaze a path that is unique
Yeah.
and fulfilling and rewarding.
Luis, what part of the States are you in?
I live in Colorado, Denver, Colorado.
Very
And have you
nice.
contacted the World War II Foundation for any people?
I've been trying to contact them, but haven't been able to get them on the phone, unfortunately. But I'm still trying to get in contact with them.
Well, Louise, if you have not heard from us, it's simply because we are lining up these veterans and clearing it with them to make sure that it's okay for you to contact them.
Thank you.
All right. So don't worry, we have not forgotten about it.
I really appreciate that.
Okay. Please come by anytime. And again, let us know if you want to connect with any. We have some wonderful veterans here. Luis, let me ask you this. Oh, and we have Chase also. Chase is another young man here on the program. Um, Luis, have you ever heard of donut dollies?
I think I might have. Yes.
Because I had not until a few years ago when some of our Vietnam veterans enlightened me about them. And we have a couple donut dollies on the program tonight. They were Red Cross volunteers, women who were there to help boost morale during the Vietnam War and also actually during Korea and World War II. Wonderful, fascinating stories. We have Renee Johnson. I think you should interview Renee.
Yeah.
Nancy Smoyer, I believe, is on. Nancy is another. Yeah, Nancy, you're another donut dolly. Fascinating people. Um, so yeah, so we have plenty. We have nothing but veterans here at the Veterans Breakfast Club.
Well, it's a great honor to be able to be here and listen to everyone's stories and
That's
just
great.
share my own passion with you guys. So would love to be honored to speak with any veterans here.
Great. Um, so join us whenever. Also, is Chase, did Chase drop off? I think he dropped off. No, Chase is here.
There he is.
And I do want to invite everybody, please raise a subject, an issue if you want to talk. Dave Seaver, he needs to be connected to Colin Heaton. I totally agree with you. Okay. Chase.
I managed to I got my great uncles their two Luftwaffe photos and then the one in the Theopedites from Munich pulled up.
Okay, now remind us again about these are, did you say your great grandparents?
Great uncle.
Great uncle, and they were Luftwaffe pilots.
No. So one was a sergeant on the Eastern Front as a ground mechanic, and the other one was in the Italian theater as an administrative colonel.
Okay.
And so the reason why he was sent to Italy was because he beat up an SS officer. So he was in Poland just after graduation from the officers' academy, and was walking by the Warsaw Ghetto, and he saw this young girl like by the fence begging for food, and so he snapped off a piece of his ration and handed to her. And this SS Obersturm and this SS colonel comes up to him and starts harassing him about it, insulting him and all that.
Wow.
And my family is Bavarian royalty on a lesser scale,
Uh-huh.
so he was extremely insulted at the time. And so he got into a fist fight, and as punishment, he was sent to Italy to do boring clerical work. He
Would-
fought in the Gothic line and surrendered to British paratroopers in 1944.
Oh boy. That probably saved his life.
Yes, unlike the sergeant, he served 1942 to 44 on the Eastern Front as a ground mechanic. In 1944, he was transferred to the Air Raid Protection Police. He was awarded the Silver Wound Badge, Iron Cross Second Class, Ground Mechanics Badge. In 1945, he was assigned to the Volkssturm or People's Militia, and he was assigned as an instructor for Hitler Youth members.
Hmm.
And one story he had was this one kid had a revolver that his grandfather had captured during World War One. And the kid was like shooting it off at the firing range while all the other kids had Kar 98s and all that type of stuff. And one of the bullets misfired and blew the kid's hand off. And so his supervising SS corporal just threw a bandage at the kid and told him to go home.
Hmm.
3 days before the war ended in April, he was caught deserting by a Hitler Youth soldier after an American tank overran his position, and the kid shot him, killed him 3 days before the war ended
Oh my.
for desertion. Um, and then I had one in the fire police, which was the fire department from Munich. He mostly didn't see much combat because he had been wounded in Spain, during the Spanish Civil War. So he mostly did minor training for local Volkssturm cadets, but these were like mandatory factory workers, firefighters, people that needed to be kept away from combat for purposes for the industry. And he
Right.
surrendered to American forces in 1945 after Munich was captured.
So these stories that you've just shared with us, these are stories that have been passed down to you, obviously from maybe your parents or maybe your grandparents. Are they things that you had to do much research on, or are they, did you get them chapter and verse from other family members?
The medals I've personally like discovered, and it's been a pain, but I've discovered like every single award and decoration, the citations and all that. The stories have been passed down to me by my grandmother, who got them from her mother. We had a Luger that my great uncle, the sergeant, had given her when he was in the Air Raid Protection Police, and he said to her, "If the Soviets come, shoot the children, then yourselves." He
Ugh.
then handed her the Luger and walked outside. She watched from the window as a Wehrmacht, as an army captain, came up to him and berated him. "Where is your handgun? Where is your weapon?" And he explained to him that he had lost it. So the captain shoved him a Panzerfaust, the disposable anti-tank rocket, and sent him to the front lines. That was the last we ever saw of him.
Oh,
The only official cause of death that we ever got was a infantry assault badge that he had been awarded a day before his death for assaulting an American tank and destroying it.
boy, oh boy. And I'll ask you what I asked Louise, which is why are you so interested in these stories?
I personally think that as a novel writer, it provides great material, but also because people genuinely tend to assume German soldiers during the war as Nazis.
Yeah,
However, the the term Nazi was determined derogatory, and you could be sent to a concentration camp for calling a SS officer or a Wehrmacht soldier a Nazi. It was considered derogatory.
Hmm.
Um, I have documents from the post-war Allied governments, from the West German governments, from Ellis Island, clearing my family's name of any involvement in any war crimes documented. They were completely innocent. My uncles hated the SS. They despised them. They considered them an insult to Prussian hierarchy and what an officer truly stood for.
Uh-huh.
And as a writer, I tend to incorporate that into my books on the realization and the discrepancy between war and propaganda.
Right. So Chase, you said you have these photos. If you wanted to send them to me sometime, email them to me. We could share them. Or if you want to share any of your writing about your family and its history, that you'd be willing to allow the Veterans Practice Club to post on our blog, it'd be wonderful for us to do that.
So these are the three guys in the fire police,
Oh,
the
yes, there
colonel,
you
and then the
are.
sergeant.
Yeah, you put them in the chat there. Okay, I see it
And
now.
then I have one more. He was a captain. He was in the German army. He was captured by Free French forces while he was drunk in Paris. And during the liberation of Paris, he was a prisoner of war commander. And we used to have this letter from an American GI that was under his command that thanked him for his kindness in his during his time in captivity, and thanked him for his kindness, his generosity with electricity and chocolates.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you, Chase. Thank you for joining us. And
Thank you for
again,
having me.
please do share any kind of writing that you'd like us to share
Yeah.
that would be appropriate for a blog post. We could talk about that.
All right.
All right. Hey, you mentioned Munich, and we're going to go to Munich on our next trip to our World War II battlefield tour of Europe, which leaves on August 24th. We're going for 2 weeks. Glenn Flickinger and I will be leading the tour. We're doing an information session tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday, March 11th, where we're going to kind of go through the itinerary, go through what's included, what's not included, answer any questions, and just have a conversation about the trip and what we're going to see. If you would like to join us, it's going to be the same Zoom link as always. The Zoom link is on our website and it's in the email that you should have received. And if you even if you don't plan to go on the trip, but you've gone it maybe on it before or something, you've been seen some of these sites in Normandy, or the English Channel, uh, the Netherlands, Munich, uh, Battle of the Bulge, Luxembourg, that you'd like to share, please do join us. And anyhow, and maybe you could give us some tips and hints about what we should see on our trip. We'll also be back on Thursday, that's 7 p.m., March 13th, and we're going to focus on the glider airborne, where you have an author who's going to be joining us who has written a book about the glider airborne, gliders in the World War II. And then a week from today, St. Patrick's Day, we're having a Jeopardy game. So join us for that, please. All right. Now I'm going to open it up. Anybody have anything they want to talk about? Because you know me,
Daria.
I'll gab and gab and gab. Daria, please raise your electronic hand.
I'm gonna figure that out. Right now, this one's gonna have to do.
Okay. All right.
So I just want to say that you said there are a few donut dollies on the program, and I just want to really reach out, and I sent a little chat to Renee, and I have some other donut dollies names, but I just want to say to everyone, and I think Todd's mentioned this a couple of times, in our very, very special upcoming spring issue of the magazine, we're having a section that is about like our remembrances of what everybody thought, how they felt, if they felt anything or nothing, or whatever stories come to mind that they remember when on April 30th, 1975, or whenever it was they got the news that Saigon fell. And so far we have some wonderful pieces, and I thank everyone who sent them in. We don't have any women yet, and I would love to include the donut dollies, because through Todd and this program, I've just
You can be here.
I love you guys, and I would love to include you in this, so that I love all the men who contributed, but I would love to have them too. And if there are any nurses in the audiences, but we've been sending out emails, but I just wanted to give that shout out. That's it.
Thank you for that shout out. That's a great shout out. So what you're talking about is our next magazine.
Right.
And we called our next magazine a very, very, very special issue of our magazine, which is going to focus on the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. It was such a fateful day for so many of our Veterans Breakfast Club members, and of course for our Vietnam veterans. But it also, recent events, the fall of Kabul in 2021, I think brought a lot of those memories back, and had a lot of us kind of questioning whether history repeated itself in that sense. So we thought that we would do a lot of stories about the fall of Saigon, and encourage people to remember how awful that really was, from so many different perspectives. And so we're devoting a whole issue, or most of an issue, to that episode, that historical episode. And that brings me to, if you don't get our magazine, we send it out to about now 11,000 households, all 50 states, and then we hand distribute a lot more. If you don't get it in the mail, it's because we don't have your address, and we send it free of charge. It's really the marketing that we do. These are original stories, veterans who have shared their stories on our programs or in interviews, or in our live in-person breakfasts. We capture the stories here and share them. And it's a great way for us to get the word out about what the Veterans Breakfast Club does, as well as to share the stories, which is our mission. So you'd be doing us a big favor with our mission if you took a magazine and handed it off to somebody who might be interested. Just let me know if you would like 25 or 50 or 100 shipped to you. If you have somewhere you think people would enjoy reading it, let us know. Our next issue will be out. When will it be out, Daria?
Early April.
Early April. Yes.
Yeah.
Early April. We better get on that, huh?
Yeah, we're working hard.
We are working hard. We are working. I wrote all weekend. That's all I did. I did a ton of writing, and it was fascinating focusing a lot on the fall of Saigon, and it was fascinating for me to really dig into it. So that's where my head's at right now.
And I'm just going to add that because Todd brought that up about the fall of Saigon, what we have at the sort of the end of the magazine is two really unique perspectives from one from an army sergeant who had served in Afghanistan but was part of the digital Dunkirk, and another from a Marine who was at Abbey Gate during the fall. So I think there's a lot of interesting, thought-provoking comparisons.
Parallels. Absolutely. It's amazing to read those, and they're extremely well written. Oh my gosh. They are wonderful accounts of the fall of Kabul, and it's so reminiscent of the fall of Saigon. It's remarkable. Dave Seaver asked, and I'm going to get to Rich and Jana here in a second, but Dave Seaver asks, when did the donut dollies go away? Renee, I'm going to ask you. You have to unmute. There we go.
I was just trying to type back to Dave. The last donut dolly in Vietnam left in May of 1972. There were still some in Korea, but they ended in 1973, and that was the very end of the donut dolly program.
73 was the very end.
Yes.
And they were replaced by what?
There was no replacement. There were still USOs and special services in foreign countries, but the need for our particular kind of program really didn't exist any longer. We could have kept clubs or centers where people could come in, but those were already being done, as I said, by special services and USO. So the need wasn't as great as it had been in previous years.
And donut dollies were overseas recreational programming people.
Exactly.
And right. And what made it what you did special, among other things, is that you traveled around to pretty remote locations where there wasn't otherwise any kind of entertainment or contact with the world. Are you telling me, Renee, that there wasn't a need for that after Vietnam?
Not really. There were not many areas that were that remote in any other countries. There certainly was. Most of the troops in other countries, like in Korea, that might be at outlying facilities, could get back in periodically. They didn't stay out in the field where there was nothing, like they did in Vietnam.
And maybe
or earlier days of Korea.
And maybe they didn't need the morale boost.
Well, probably it wouldn't have hurt, but again, USO did a wonderful job, as did special services. So, those morale boosters, when they could get in, were there for them.
And Renee, you're going to be part of a special
Like in
program.
Thailand, we had USOs. In Thailand, in Korea, Japan, Philippines. I can't even think of where all there were USOs that the guys could get to.
And I'm hoping you're going to be part of a special program that we have scheduled for March 31st. Women civilians in Vietnam, in country in Vietnam, because there were plenty of them.
That's true.
And we're hoping that we might be able to get a USO performer to join us who served in Vietnam, right?
I haven't been looking for one. I don't know how we would do that.
I think it's Ann Kelsey. I think she knows one. Yeah, I think it's Ann who
I know. So I gave you the name of somebody who worked for USO in Vietnam in the fairly early years.
Okay.
But the performers and the USO centers employees were two entirely different things.
Different. All right. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Can I just respond to Dave to say that the reason he never saw us is that there were 627 of us versus how many men there? Millions of men. And we were at, Renee's better at figures, X number 20 bases and going forward from those bases. But, there weren't very many of us.
Also, Dave Seaver was in diapers during the Vietnam War. So that's probably why.
Yeah, that doesn't have a good reason.
We didn't change diapers.
Right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Nancy and Renee. This is perfect. Okay, Jana's iPad.
All right, this is Paul from Lancaster.
Paul, how are you?
Doing fine, doing fine. I've been doing some research on family members like myself who were in the military, and I found out that my uncle, who served in World War II, was stationed in Brazil. And I thought that's a strange place to be stationed. I wonder if anybody on the Zoom might know why would the U.S. Army Air Force, because he was a meteorologist down there, why they would be down there in Brazil during World War II.
And also part two of that question is he was from Philly and his name was Fred Martin. So there's possibly people on this broadcast who would have known him.
Fred Martin.
Yes.
Right. From Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. And he served in World War II. And do you say the Army Air Corps?
Correct. Right.
And he's a meteorologist who served
meteorologist,
in Brazil.
Right, stationed in Brazil.
Man,
because
that is
he knew some Portuguese or something.
You do not hear about
I
that.
know.
I know. I'm shocked, shaking my head like, what?
I wish we had Glenn Flickinger because he could probably answer that. We did a program. Okay. And you don't know where in Brazil? Obviously toward the coast, I would think, right?
No. I mean, he's just like all the other guys that came back. I was talking to my cousin the other day, and he said his dad didn't tell him anything other than he was in Brazil and he's a meteorologist. I mean, for all we know, he was in special forces. Yeah, no, you don't know.
Do you have his military records from the National Archives?
No.
Oh, that's your next step.
Yeah.
That's your next step.
There's a lot of Fred Martin, so that's the hard part to look him up.
You definitely, and it's not hard to do.
Okay.
The only, and I'll send you, I can send you, if you want to email me, Todd, Todd, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. Very easy to do. You can order records directly from the National Archives. And some of them can be quite detailed. So it'll really shed light on what he was doing there. Guaranteed.
Would I need to know his social security number? What information do you need to have to?
Yeah, you'll need some of his information. I don't think you won't need his social security information, but you'll need some of his information. It should be publicly available. The only issue is, of course, whether his records were destroyed in the 1973 St. Louis fire.
Yeah.
But if they weren't, they'll be available. And if you need any help with it, we work, the Veterans Breakfast Club, all the time with a wonderful military records researcher, Beth Russell.
Yeah, she was on.
Great.
We saw her at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Please do.
Yeah.
But that's a great question. I'm going to write that down for a question for Glenn. Now, where did you serve, Paul?
I was in the U.S. Navy, mainly on the West Coast. I did 2 tours in San Diego, was enlisted, then went to college and went back in as a supply corps officer for 5 more years.
The whole time in San Diego?
No, San Diego, and then Newport, Rhode Island, where I met my beautiful wife. And then after that, I went to seminary. So I've been in the ministry for 40 years now, I guess.
Is there any connection between your Navy service and your ministry?
Yes. And that is because I was in the business side of the Navy. And so when I got out, I didn't feel called to be a preacher and do funerals and weddings and all of that. And I met with a seminary professor who was visiting up in New England at the time. And he said, well, you can become a church administrator because churches need someone to do the finances, manage the custodians and food service and all the things you're doing right now. I mean, I was a hazardous material officer up in Newport, and ended up my first job in the church was asbestos removal.
Gosh.
So yes, to answer your question, yes, God orchestrated that opportunity, so that was good.
Yes, so that you could serve in the way that is, best for everybody.
Exactly.
How great. How great. I'm looking at Ben right here. He's a fellow minister, Episcopalian retired minister. How are you, Ben?
Oh, I'm doing great, but still active in ministry. I'm a failure at retirement.
Yes, you are. Terrible failure at retirement.
But I wanted to answer Paul's question. We had that World War II in the Caribbean program. We talked about the number of aircraft that went to North Africa, went through Brazil and crossed the Atlantic from Brazil rather than going across the North Atlantic, particularly going to Northern Africa.
There we go.
So obviously, if you're transit refueling, one of the people you always want to talk to is the weatherman. So I'm not surprised that Paul had a relative who was a meteorologist who was in Brazil during World War II.
Good. You found
All right. I appreciate
Thank
that. Thank you.
Oh, also, can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah, hey, how you doing,
Yep.
Ron?
Okay, fine. There's a movie that come out right at the beginning of World War II called Air Force, and it's an old one, okay? And it was right at the kickoff of right before Pearl Harbor. It starts out, and these guys are flying B-17s to Hickam. And what they did was they took off at Mitchell Field in New York. They fly down to Florida, and then they're flying to Caribbean, and they're stopping off in South America in Brazil as they fly over towards Hawaii. Okay.
Wow.
And they're getting with the weather guy in Brazil to get the weather as they're flying towards Hawaii.
No way. Wait till
And
you
then as they get to Hawaii, all hell was they're listening to radio, and all heck is breaking loose at Pearl Harbor. And when they got there, they had to make a landing at one of the other airfields because they were under attack by the Japanese. Then
Wow.
from there, then in this movie, Air Force, they made their way to the Philippines, and the name of the plane was called the Marianne. And they made a belly landing, and they fixed it themselves, and the pilot got killed, but a fighter pilot ended up flying the plane, and they made their way back and got to Australia, and it's a great movie. I mean, there's a lot of Hollywood in it naturally, but the name of the movie is called Air Force, and I just remember about them making their way to Hickman. Yep, that's it. And they made their way to Hickam via Brazil.
You got to watch it, Paul.
All right.
It's
Thank you
Warner
much.
Brothers. It's a Howard Hawks movie, so you know it's going to be well directed. John Garfield, I guess, starred in it. I had not heard of that. Thank you so much.
Gig
Ron.
Young's in it. Harry Carey. Oh, it's a great movie. It's black and white, yeah, but it's a great World War II movie. I really enjoyed it, and I can't tell you how many times I watch it.
Oh,
That's
so
great. All right. I'll pass that on to my cousin.
You're getting way more suggestions here, and I hope. Do you read the chat here, Paul?
read the chat.
Yeah. Yes, I
Okay,
do.
because you're getting a lot of recommendations here. Justin Miller.
Well, good evening, I guess I should say.
Yeah, how are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. The first thing I want to say something to all the donut dollies on here is that to show you the power that you had, about 12 years ago, the Vietnam Helicopter Pilot Association had a reunion in Kansas City and a parade in Parkville. Normally, we get half the group going to the parade. 1,500 people went to the parade because we were promised at the very beginning real life donut dollies with coffee and donuts. Plus an open Budweiser truck at the end. But it was just, when I was there with the 25th Division, we flew you all the time. We enjoyed doing it. And I had another thought. Now I'll wait. All of a sudden I lost that other piece of train of thought. But thank you to the ladies. You know, my nurses, you all were always on the top of our list anytime you needed to go anywhere.
Isn't that great? We all lose our trains of thought when we think about donut dollies.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the girls, and it always messes it up.
You know, it's so true, Justin, because we're planning this big event for Vietnam Veterans Day, March 29th, and it's the final official commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War this year. And we have a big event here in Pittsburgh. We get hundreds of people there. We do a pinning ceremony, and I always like to get a speaker or two. And this year I just thought, man, I got to get a donut dolly there to talk. If I want to get a crowd there, I got to get a donut dolly there. And so we did. We got one. Man, they're expensive too, Renee. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
You were also talking about getting someone from the USO.
Yes, and that is for a program on March 31st, on a Zoom program.
All right, may I suggest?
Yes.
A few years ago, we had a 50th anniversary of, I think, the beginning of the war in Hawaii at the Pacific Aviation Museum.
Yes.
And one of the folks that was there was Anne Margaret.
Okay.
I presented her with a sort of a mini plaque of the fact that in Cu Chi, Vietnam, when she came in '66, there's a part in the wire. She just walked out. That became the Anne Margaret Gate. And she was very nice about it. But I think it's something worth at least giving them a call and see if she'll come on a Zoom for you.
Okay. And she's still with us?
She's still with us.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Okay.
Just a thought.
I think it's a great thought. It's a great thought. Renee.
I just wanted to know if Justin was a little bear.
Yes, ma'am, I was a little bear.
All right. Because y'all did so much for us when I was at Coochie that, we just had the utmost respect for the little bears. So
well, Renee,
thank you for all the great flights. Todd, I was going to say something about USO. The USO tours had so many different aspects. They had singers, they had dancers, they had handshake tours where people like football players and baseball players all would go around and just say hi to the guys and shake hands. There were so many of those going around that people hardly knew about them. There was one actress that came over and she was doing essentially a handshake tour, and that was in the days when you had to pay for long distance calls. And I looked her up the other day because I found a photograph of her where we were sitting, and unfortunately she's now deceased, but she would any of the guys that were from California, she would get their families' telephone numbers because it didn't cost that much to call out of state, and she would call their families and tell them she had talked to them, that they were okay.
Oh, how
so
great.
The USO did a whole lot of special things that are kind of unknown and not written about.
Yeah, behind the scenes.
Oh, yes.
Behind the scenes.
Our friend Libby Hegvik, if you remember her, a young woman whose father was in the 101st Airborne, a helicopter pilot, whose mother was a donut dolly. She was on a few weeks ago talking about a documentary about the donut dollies that she's working on. And she did complete the documentary, but she wants to add footage from March 29th, from the Vietnam Veterans Day event in Washington, D.C. this year, before she releases the film. But she did send out this 1-minute trailer. And I know we're going to get dinged on YouTube for the copyright for the music, but I thought I'd share it with you just because it does give a great sense of the stories that this documentary is going to tell. And when it comes out in April, we will want to screen it and have a conversation with the dollies about it. So here's the trailer.
I just got off shift. I saw these two American girls. I said to myself, what are they doing here?
We were there to serve the morale of our troops. It certainly was the most unusual year of my life. Our job was to smile, and we smiled, and we smiled.
Just wonder sometimes if the Red Cross knew that they were sending them to a war zone.
They volunteered and they put their life in danger, but not enough people know our story.
Great stuff. Great stuff. So we're going to be looking forward to that documentary coming out. All right. What else we got here? What else we got on the... Because I got stuff on my list, but you don't want to hear me. All right. You got it. Does anybody here remember the draft lottery of December 1st, 1969? Was anybody here part of it? Like really paying attention? Chris Perullo, Corky, you're shaking your head. Yes.
Chad Riddle?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Chad's here. Yeah, I know, because Chad told me about that. Chad, you're where I first really learned about how this worked. Okay, Chris Perullo. Explain to me, like I'm 5, what the draft lottery December 1st, 1969 was and why it was different from what had come before.
Well, before that, I'll do the best I can. Technically, I don't know. I'm not sure I can answer all the questions here or your question, but prior to that, the lottery, prior to that, there was no lottery. Everybody was in the pool. And as can't say the war was winding down, but Nixon administration decided to quell the part of that was they wanted to quell the choose my words carefully here.
Yeah.
All the resistance to
Sure.
the
Draft
draft,
resistance, right?
and all the anti-war. So they looked at their manpower needs and said, okay, here's what we'll do to make it. Here's what we'll do. We'll hold a lottery based on your birth date. Okay. And then we know how much manpower we believe we'll need, how many people were born January through December, whatever, on these dates, and we'll understand exactly how deep we have to go into the numbers. So they held that lottery, and you hoped you had a high number. You didn't know what a high number meant, but you knew that if you were out of the first, let's say 75 to 100, it was unlikely that you would be drafted. So that kind of allowed people to sort of at least have a gauge that they weren't just going to, like myself, walk out of high school in 1970 and right into the Marine Corps.
Right.
Because I could have been drafted at any moment. And that's why I remember it so vividly, because that happened in December of 69. I'm getting out of high school in the third day of January of 70. I'm sorry, June of 70. So I therefore the grace of God, period. And so that was what we paid attention to. My number was 148.
Okay, I was just going to ask. So the one draft lottery that I remember that I read about and remember seeing about was on December 1st, 1969. It was such a big deal. So there were subsequent lotteries like the following year.
See, I don't remember that now. I was just thought of that. I thought, wait a minute, did they do it every year, or did that number sort of count?
Right.
For a few years after that, did they have to repeat it on an annual basis? I can't remember that.
Chris, I appreciate the try, but I have a 5-year-old and you would have lost her at technically.
Really? Okay.
Hey, Todd.
God forbid you would have to go through that.
Hey, Todd.
Yes.
My number was 54.
There you go.
Oh, that's not good.
No. And they had two tumblers. One had every day of the year. The other had a number, and they picked it out, and they picked it out like that. And it was an amazing evening in the dormitories at St. Vincent College when you could be walking up and down the hall and you could tell if somebody got a low number or somebody got a high number. And let's just say lower numbers won more epithets than did higher numbers.
Yes. So this draft lottery, it is so fascinating for me to hear about, Chad. Remember, before the draft lottery, there was a college student deferment. So people like Chad were safe from being drafted so long as they were full-time college students and in good academic standing.
Until we graduated.
Until you graduated. The lottery replaced that. It did away with the college student deferment, and it was just a lottery. If your birthday was picked, and I think the first date that was picked was September 14th, so everybody who had a birthday September 14th, they were being drafted right away into the military. And the next one was in April, and it went down the list. The longer you waited to hear your birthday called, the safer you were from being drafted within the next year. That's essentially how it worked. So Chad, you watched, I'm sure you were glued to the TV or the radio that night.
We had the radio on, yes, in every room.
In every room. You got your number. Did it then change your plans? I mean, you had a low number, you were going to get drafted.
It didn't change my plans. I was still going to graduate in May, but I knew I had to think about what I was going to do. And my wife and I, we were dating at the time. We happened to be waiting in line to play goofy golf on McKnightmare Road in North Hills. And there was a guy, he was a bird dog recruiter for the Navy right in front of us. And so we were talking, one thing led to another. He told me, give the guy a call. I did. And I went to interview with him. He was the chief petty officer. And he said, you might qualify for the officer program. And I said, who do I talk to? He sent me downtown. And one thing led to another. And when I was trying to teach you seamanship over in Vietnam, I was glad that I knew some of the things that I picked up working on the Great Lakes because it got me in.
It got you in.
Yeah.
Ben Wright, do you remember that?
Oh, I remember it. I was, of course, already on active duty. I was in officer training school. In fact, I graduated in officers training school and was commissioned the next week. But some interesting things happens because of it. Of course, I had draft orders in hand when I went and signed up for the Air Force. And my number was 66 and they went to 100. So I would have been drafted anyway if I'd been a year later. So it was all kind of irrelevant. But an interesting thing happened. We had people who were in officer training school and basic training after they drew the lottery who did what they called a self-initiated elimination, or they call it an SIE. And I mean, they could put up their hand and say, the military's not for me, I want out. And so you would be discharged as not suitable for military service, but they would do it because they knew they wouldn't be drafted if they had a high draft number.
Oh, wow.
And so there were a few people who had joined the military and got out by a less than desirable way just because they knew they wouldn't be drafted.
Because they knew they wouldn't be drafted.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy. Clem, you were out of the military by the time
Yes,
lottery
yes,
came around.
yes, Todd, I was, but I can recall reading at one time, I believe they were considering not just the number, but the alphabet. And if you had, you had the, let's say your number was number 1 with the last alphabet of, let's say, the letter R, and then they would take all those with the last name of that began with R, their last name, Riddle, for example.
Yeah.
So Chad, you could have been gone that way, but I don't know if they actually passed that part of it. I don't remember if they actually passed the part of the alphabet or not. But
I don't remember hearing about that.
They were considering it. I read it some time ago in one of the books about Vietnam, but I don't know if that part actually passed, but they were considering it.
I'm going to share this. This is remarkable, and I got this on social media. A young person, like around my daughter's age in their 20s, sent around this clip saying, "Can you believe this? That this actually happened?" This is a report from that night, December 1st, 1969. You'll see Roger Mudd talking about the draft lottery.
Mayberry RFD will not be presented tonight, but will return next week at its regularly scheduled time over most of these stations. The Draft Lottery, a live report on tonight's picking of the birth dates for the draft. Here at Selective Service Headquarters in Washington is CBS News correspondent Roger Mudd.
Good evening. It was 29 years ago that the first and most famous lottery number, 158, was drawn as the United States entered World War II. Tonight, for the first time in 27 years, the United States has again started a draft lottery. And the famous first pick tonight is September 14th, the first birthday that now is designated 001, which means for 19-year-olds born on September 14th, that beginning in January, local draft boards will induct those men born on September 14th, barring deferments. The next birthday in order, April 24th, and so on down the line this evening. This ceremony, which began at 8 o'clock, is now more than 2/3 through. This evening, this has been a very systematic, almost mechanical lottery, the first really nationally televised lottery we've ever had. There's been little excitement here, but for one or two brief occasions, 4 or 5 of the Youth Advisory Council members declined to participate, claiming that they thought they were being used by the Nixon administration to give a youth approval to the lottery system. The main information we have this evening, of course, is the order of the birthdays. And those will determine how the 19-year-olds next year, those from 19 to 26, will be subject to the draft. So let's go down the list and give you the ascending order in which they were drawn tonight. These are in ascending order. It is generally agreed, stipulated by the Selective Service people, that those men with the lowest numbers, the lowest third, will be drafted. The middle group, that is the group with the numbers between about 120 and 240, stand about a 50-50 chance of being drafted next year. Number 69 in the most liable group, June 13th, December 21st, September 10th, October 12th, June 17th, April 27th, May 19th, November 6th, January 28th, December 27th, October.
On and on. Boy, how strange. What a strange time that must have been. I'm going to ask Chase. Chase, what are your thoughts on that? How would you feel about watching the draft lottery on TV to see if you're going to be drafted?
Honestly, that is just gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
Because at this point, you've worked so hard to get into a college, into a university in the 60s. You've done so much. And now you're just being put at, like, machine gun fodder at this point. I just had a question. What was the benefits of volunteering over enlisting?
Wonderful question, Chase. Man, it's as if you've planted it. Let me go to Scott Masters first. Do you know what? Scott will actually answer the question. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. You don't have to answer the question. You can say what you wanted to say, but I'm jotting Chase's question down because it's a great one.
Well, I can answer it from the perspective of the Canadian Army in World War II. By volunteering, you got your choice of service as opposed to being put in the infantry, which is what happened most of the time. And I'm guessing it was probably a pretty similar thing in the American Army.
And that's exactly it. And throughout the eras, Korea, Vietnam, that was the general rule. If you get drafted, you're most likely going to be drafted into the Army, probably Army infantry. If you're super unlucky, the Marine Corps. But it was going to be, you're more than likely going to be put into some kind of combat position. You had better odds of getting some kind of specialized training by volunteering. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Todd, I had 3 really quick points to make based on things that have come up at different points tonight. First, in response to the guy who was asking about meteorologists in Brazil, I actually interviewed a couple of pilots who were part of the Southern Ferry route, and they went through Brazil, and one of them happened to be Gail Halverson, Uncle Wiggly Wings. He was stationed there for a while, and there was a Canadian pilot I interviewed who crossed in a B-26 and actually went down in the Sahara Desert. It was an absolutely fascinating story. So lots of guys were flying through that route. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention, and I'll put a photo here in the chat. Just this weekend, I was interviewing a British veteran who lives in Burlington, not too far from Toronto. And he was a first wave D-Day guy in the Royal Berkshires, went ashore at Juno Beach with the Canadians. And we were just talking about his family background, and he mentioned his father was a veteran of the First World War, and he had his father's medals and never knew what they were all about. And it turned out one of the medals was a medal for bravery that was issued by the British Army during the war. And this guy knows nothing about his father's service, knows nothing about why he got this medal. He's literally spent a lifetime investigating it. So just in response to that issue from the earlier part of the conversation, why share these stories? This guy has spent a lifetime, wanting to know exactly what his father did. And It just seems to be lost in the paperwork somewhere. But he was an extremely interesting guy to talk to. The other point I wanted to make, and this is germane to the conversation going on right now. You guys know I'm up in Toronto. I have taught a lot of students whose grandfathers came to Canada during the war. And I'm wondering, and I know it's a conversation, it's a question I've asked many of you Vietnam vets in this room who have, met with my students before. I'm wondering if any of you guys had friends who left the US to come to Canada, and if so, what you thought about that.
Great question, Scott. And I did a little digging to try and figure out how many Americans went to Canada to escape the draft during the Vietnam War. And there really aren't good figures on it. Nobody really knows. The estimate is about 30,000, maybe 40,000, as high as 60,000, but nobody really knows.
It's 30,000 is the number I've heard. And Todd, you might find this interesting. I recently got in touch with a guy named Mark Satin who came to Toronto to get away from the draft, and he was very instrumental in setting up a network for draft dodgers,
right,
or resistors coming north. But a very interesting guy. I got connected to him through the grandfather of one of my students, actually.
And it was through you that we learned about people who went the other direction, Canadians who came to the United States simply to join the U.S. military to fight in Vietnam. And there were 30,000 of those who went the other way, who we never hear about. And we, a couple of years ago, we did a program with them, Scott. I think we should have them on again because it's such an unusual story that so few people know about. I had never known. I'd like to focus on that again if we could. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, my pleasure. I actually spoke to another Canadian who fought in Vietnam just a few weeks ago. They have a pretty big association up here. And Brad Washabaugh and I got into an interesting conversation about this because I had done an interview not too long ago. And I remember listening to the guy, and I was very suspicious of some of the things he was saying. Like, it really didn't seem like it was adding up. And I've picked up enough things from you guys over the years where I started asking him really specific questions, like when his DROS was and things along those lines, and he just wasn't answering them satisfactorily. So I followed up with Brad about that. And this other vet I saw last weekend, he was a president of one of these associations up here, and he said they don't let people join. I hope I'm not going to get the number wrong, unless they can produce their DD-216, unless they have that paperwork. It's a big problem. I mean, on both sides of the border, a lot of people lie about it.
That's so odd. DD-214. Yeah. You need to produce it. Jim Roberts.
Yeah, just you asked a question about enlisting versus draft. I can only give you one snapshot. I enlisted in March of '69 in the Army. At that time, enlistment was a 3-year commitment. Drafting was 2 years. So there was a 1 year. If you enlisted, you gave them an extra year. You had a chance to put down what you wanted, but everything you signed always ended with the phrase "for the good of the service." And so it's not clear. I don't know for sure if you got your choice as far as that was concerned. If you went in, the needs of the infantry were pretty high, but if you were drafted, you were pretty much assured you were probably going to go to the infantry.
You were going to go to the infantry, and if you were drafted, you owed. I'd always heard 2 years, but
2 years. Now, what was interesting is during the drawdown, I owed them 3 years when I enlisted, but I enlisted essentially July 1, but I got commissioned out of OCS on May 15th, and I owed them 2 years. So that cut like 45 days off my obligation. And then because of the Vietnamization and drawdown, I was supposed to come home from Vietnam on April 2nd. They sent me home on December 2nd. And they weren't letting us stay in. I had no choice. My wife and I had planned our budget and everything with me getting out on April 2nd. We figured out, how we would exist while we were transitioning. And they put me out on December 2nd, which was a financial hardship, but that cut even more time off my obligation. So it was for the need of the service, the good of the service.
Need of the service.
Yeah.
And those
so
needs
they didn't even ask me. I mean, a year before I went there, they were offering first lieutenants captain's bars for 6-month extension in Vietnam. And if you were in the field, if you were in infantry, and that wasn't even on the table when I was there because of the drawdown, and they were pushing people back, getting people out as quickly as they can.
Would you have taken it? The captain's bars
No,
for 6 months.
no, not in my situation. It had gone from okay to bad to worse, and was getting worse every day. So, no, I wouldn't have taken it.
So, Jim, how many months did you have cut off your Vietnam service?
I had 4. I was there 8 months.
4 months.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, the interesting thing was, I left December 2nd. They overran my position on February 2nd. And so if I'd have been there April 2nd, it would have been, this might have been a different story.
You might not be here.
Well, that's possible. The two American, when I left, there were 3 of us. There were 3 of us there were 3 of us at the camp. I was the last MAT team member of 2 on the district team. When I left, there were only 2. And I ran just by accident. I ran into the district NCO some 10 years later, and they managed to escape and evade and hid in the jungle for a couple of days until they were able to signal a passing helicopter and get picked up.
Oh my gosh!
But what was interesting is the regional forces retook the camp in November of that year. They took it back, and then it was one of the first camps to fall during the fall of Saigon.
Oh boy! What a story. Chase.
So I have info on the British World War I medals. So for the Bravery Decoration, that is the military medal, which was a common enlisted award for privates up to warrant officers. That was published in the London Gazette. I believe that the National Archives has kept specific files related to them. Then you have the 1914 to 1915 star, which means that he was on mobilization in 1914. The yellow and blue one is the War Merit Medal. That was awarded in 1919 for participation in World War I. And then the rainbow one is the World War I Victory Medal, which was issued to almost every Entente or Allied country during the war with different designs. That was awarded for service up to 6 months in frontline combat in the First World War.
Chase, I'm very disappointed that you can't tell us the alloys that these metals were made from. And I'm kidding, of course. Chase, that's unbelievable. Thank you so much for this information. Oh my gosh. You got that? You write that down, Scott? Mr. Masters, I hope you wrote that down.
Yeah.
Also,
I did recognize most of the medals. The unfortunate thing is that his father's paperwork has been lost.
Paperwork.
Yeah, he doesn't
the
know
award certificate should be inside the National Archives in London, because the London Gazette published the reason for the certificates.
He has already searched there. Just his dad's papers just don't seem to be there for whatever reason.
Oh, that is very odd.
Yeah, bad luck.
Bad luck. Mark Spirdigliozzi.
Back to the lottery and just give you a couple of thoughts on that. Number one, when I was drafted in 1967, the time that you spend in training and basic training and advanced infantry training at Fort Polk and went to Vietnam, if at the end of your 12 months in Vietnam, you had less than 5 months service left, you could extend an extra month and then ETS when you deroast. Wait a second there. I hope everybody understands that ETS and all of that. So that, was one way that you could get out a little bit early. Number two is I was in Phuc Vinh, Tay Ninh, Vietnam, and on December 1st, 1969. And we were backed up against the Cambodian border. The lottery was going on. And just to share, I have bad luck, Todd. If I bought rabbits for breeding, they'd be brothers. I'm telling you, I mean it, I can't get any good luck. I would have been number 37. Okay. So you have, I would have, no matter what happened, I would have ended up in Vietnam. But the other story is I was drafted out of the local board here in Pennsylvania, actually in Altoona, local board 33 drafted me, but I was living in Detroit, so I got an extra couple of weeks because they couldn't catch up with me quick enough. And we went to the Fort Wayne Induction Center, which was in downtown Detroit, and they had gathered up young 18 and 19-year-olds from all over Michigan at that point, and we were all standing there and had gone through our pre-induction physicals. We're actually standing there in our skivvies, and they had us in lines. They had us all lined up in the very first formation I was ever in the military was at the Fort Wayne Induction Center. But anyways, as they looked at this motley group of people, the sergeant that was in charge of it all said, "Are there any volunteers here who would like to, instead of going into the Army and going to combat immediately, would like to volunteer to be drafted into the Marine Corps?" You could have heard a pin drop at that point in that
I
place,
can't imagine.
and there was nobody there that was going to volunteer to do it. So the way that they did it is they had us count off by rows, and I think there might have been 20 rows. My memory, heavens, I can't remember what I had for supper tonight, let alone back that far, but we were all lined up in those rows, and he said, "Now everybody that's in an odd row, where the person in front of you was 1, 3, 5, whatever it happened to be, you guys are lucky. You are going to the Marine Corps." And half of that group went to the Marine Corps that day.
So that was your luck, Mark.
That was the other part. Yes, I was in the even row. The only, well, I don't know. It might have been good to be a Marine. There's a couple of Marines here that are good friends of mine, and I wear a shirt that says Army because Marines need heroes too, and they literally run me. I'm gonna get tarred and feathered someday with that shirt on here.
Yeah.
So, but it was, and the other thing, just so you know, Jerry Forrest, who was our 100-year-old, he passed on Valentine's Day. We had a wonderful party for him during Veterans Day of this year to celebrate his 100th birthday, and cake and all of the troops and the representatives and all of that, and he had a marvelous time. But he passed peacefully, but there was nobody like him. I'll tell you, he was quite a character. So
Gary Forrest.
Yes.
Thank you for letting me know.
Yes.
And Bob McCormick, I was laughing with you today, Bob, as I was reading your wonderful memoir here that you sent me. Your grandfather was a World War I veteran. Oh, I can't hear you. What the heck's wrong with your microphone? Oh, that must be a problem with the mic. Because you're unmuted. Let's go to Chad. Chad.
When I was sent downtown to the recruiting station to the officer program, I had already signed up. They had a 6-month delay program at that time. I signed up in June. I wouldn't have to go in till December, which that gave me time to go through the paperwork to get into the officer program. And as luck would have it, I got a letter. I said, yippee. 3 days later, I got my draft notice. And then I called the recruiter and asked him, "What do I do with this thing?" He said, "Give it to me, I'll take care of it." And that's what happened.
So what did you go to OCS, or was there office?
I went to OCS up in Newport, Rhode Island.
Was OCS in the Navy as brutal as it is in the Army and Marine Corps?
Let's say that if you watch Officer and a Gentleman, that's pretty much what it was.
Okay, so it was tough.
It was tough. We had
90
to do the obstacle course. We had to do other things.
Okay.
We had a nasty DI like Richard Gere had in the movie,
Right.
but we got through. And again, they're trying to find people who can follow the rules, who can survive, and it's part teamwork as well.
Yeah. That's
It was
interesting.
fun. It was, and when they asked me later when I got out, how'd I like it? Well, it was $1 million experience. I'm glad I did it, but now it's somebody else's turn.
Yeah.
I see Brad shaking his head. He understands.
Yeah. 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 $1 million experience. I think that's a wonderful way to put it. Justin.
Well, I digress a little bit. I was going to say, I was at 8 a.m. I lost my deferment because I fell in love, and I had to get to Dallas and join the Army. And my two sergeants at 8 a.m. in the cadre and the two sergeants at the draft center here in Dallas both told me, it's a good thing you're coming down here to join because you're coming out of a military college with ROTC background, and you go to the absolute top of the draft list. You would probably be drafted within the next 2 months. And so I joined. I did the longer term for it. Eventually got to OCS and did the other things. But that's why, because the difference was U.S. versus RA. U.S. were the draftees and RA were the inductees, the regular.
Right. U.S. stood for unwilling soldier, and RA stood for real Americans.
No, RA it stood for a lot of other things like stupid.
I think it was regular Army. Yeah, regular Army. I just remembered somebody telling me that.
But the sergeant here in Dallas said, I can't guarantee you anything. And I looked at him, he was at E7. I said, Sarge, here's the deal. You get me in the program, you start me out, and I'll do the rest of it. He said, well, come back to see me when you get your bars and I'll talk to you. After OCS, I came back and I did recruiting for him.
Did you really?
Yeah. After I got back from Vietnam, my first trip, I came back as a captain, and he was still a recruiter. And I went to high schools and talked to him about it. And I said, I'm going to tell him the gory details. And he said, but you were a helicopter pilot. I said, well, but I was shot down 3 times. I've been I know this stuff. I know what was going on. We had a great time, and we were friends until he passed away about 5 years ago.
Oh boy. What an unusual story. So Justin, after you got back, you're saying from Vietnam, you would go to high schools and give talks about.
When I got back, I was stationed at Fort Walter, so I was an IP, and I would come into Dallas on small weekends or long weekends, and I'd go with him to high schools where he was doing recruiting. And he said, the best thing I can do is actually talk to him and tell him what really is going on. I don't want to,
sugarcoat
it the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so I talked to a lot of kids, and I think a lot of them went in on their own because what they had in a gang situation or other situations in their own communities, this was a better alternative.
Wow. What year was that, Justin?
I got back in November 69 for Vietnam, so I've been 70, 71, 72. And then in 73, and I'm going to put it on your thing, I was a captain of the United States Army Rifted. I was reduced in force because I was supposed to go back to college, and the Army was paying for it, but they decided I was too expensive.
Boy. It's hard to imagine what it was like to meet with those kids in 1969, 1970 at high school and, tell them what Vietnam was like. Oh, I bet they were hanging on every word.
The questions they asked, I did not get the gory stuff. I took pictures that were a little bit different. One young man asked me, he said, well, did you get caught doing anything? I said, not really. I did steal 5 pallets of beer off the Saigon docks one time because we were out of beer at Coochie, but we did not get caught, and my commanding general gave me a medal. I sort of lied. He didn't give me a medal. I just didn't get in trouble with him anymore because he liked Miller High Life.
This is great. Renee.
Hi, I just want to respond to Mark and the guys that thought they were going to the Army and became Marines. When I left Vietnam, I stayed with the Red Cross and was sent to Camp Lejeune and really experienced culture shock because my father was career Army, so I'd grown up with that. In Vietnam, I was with 2 Army divisions, so I didn't know about Marines, and they were different, and their experiences were different. At the hospital where I worked, my friends and I, also Red Cross workers, basically hung out with the hospital staff because they were all Navy and they were pretty normal. The other guys that we hung out with mostly were patients from the psych ward who would be out on leave because they had, most of them did not want to go to Vietnam and be just killed immediately. And that was in early 1970 what they expected. So they would go to their commanding officers and say, I've been smoking pot. I want help. Please help me. And so they would get admitted to the psych ward for training or treatment, and then they would be given a general discharge. And they knew what a general discharge meant, but they were willing to take that over the alternative.
Jeez, what a desperate time. Boy, oh boy. I'm
Yeah.
asking Brad Washabaugh. I believe he's the only Marine here on our program. I just think
Sorry, Brad.
yeah, it's right to, we're talking about Marines, this and that. We think we should give him some equal time to defend us. But my favorite, that may be my favorite, the Navy, they were kind of normal. And then the
Yes, I
Marines.
think we have to define what normal is now, you know. I think that could be like a sliding scale depending on who you are, where you come from. I think I'm pretty normal, don't you, Todd?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. For a Marine. Yeah, definitely.
For a Marine.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Look at it. And look, I love the Iwo Jima statue behind you. That's perfect.
That was taken last year at the Marine Corps Marathon.
Oh, are you running the Marine Corps Marathon this year?
The 50th running will be in the last weekend of October, and I ran the first one in 76. And I'm donating my patch I got in 1976 to the Marine Corps Museum. I just got a letter back from them today. They're very interested in getting that patch and putting it in a museum. So that'll be a nice tribute.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, when do you start training for that? I mean, I know that you're always training, but
Always training. I'm running a half marathon this weekend, and I'll just keep up my mileage all throughout the year. And really train in earnest in June. And I'm in North Carolina, so that's when the heat and humidity starts taking effect, and it's early rising and get the miles in.
I wonder if we could do like a Veterans Practice Club fundraising event where we have you race Jerry.
I'd make it like five steps and I'd trip or something. Jerry, I salute you.
I ran it in 98. I ran
was,
the Marathon
I was getting
in
tired.
98.
I was getting tired just listening to you. So kudos to you, my friend. That's outstanding.
Luis.
I wanted to ask Vietnam veterans if it's true that they faced lots of backlash returning to the United States after their service overseas.
Oh boy.
Because I've heard about different cases of that happening, but I'm not sure if it's too common or what's going on with that, really.
Luis, thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Because it's an astute question, and it's a painful one. I mean, I don't want to answer for the Vietnam veterans, but I could just tell you I've been doing this 17 years and I've heard a heck of a lot of stories. And yes, they were not well treated. And I think it left permanent trauma with a whole generation of veterans. And I think it's one of the saddest chapters in our history. And I do think that, well, I have a lot to say about it. It's just, I could feel the pain when some of our Vietnam veterans talk about their return home, Luis. You could feel the pain in their voices. You could see it in their faces. And it's something unique that I don't see in any other generation of veterans. Jim Roberts.
Two things. One, previously, when I was getting out, we always talked about the people who got out with bad paper, which meant less than an honorable discharge.
Yeah.
I mean, Is that a bad thing nowadays? Can people come out of the service with a less than honorable discharge and not have to worry about getting employment? Because bad paper really kind of made it very difficult for you to get a lot of jobs. Is that gone along the wayside now with the? I'm just curious because I've never heard the word used recently.
It's not used very often, but you're so right. And I think there are still lots of people get out of the military today with bad paper, with less than an honorable discharge. There's honorable, general, and dishonorable. Generally, there may be another, right? Those are the three discharges you could get. And I think certainly VA benefits are hooked to them. I knew some World War II veterans when we just started the Veterans Breakfast Club who had one had a dishonorable discharge, one had a general discharge. The dishonorable discharge, he had punched out an officer, and he was able to get it changed to a general discharge, and he was able to access some VA benefits because of that. So it was a very real thing. But that's a good question.
Well, the other thing, to answer your question in return, my return was much less complicated than a lot of the veterans that came back. I was very fortunate, I guess, just in timing and situation. But one of the things that Vietnam veterans did across the board is we vowed that we would never let the next generation of veterans be treated the same way. And when we did the first Gulf War deployment, I was going out of the airport and there was a USO place there where families could spend time before the soldier, or the Marine, or the airman or sailor got on the plane to go out. And that really warmed my heart because it was nothing like that when I was shipping out. And I think it's one of the things that most of the Vietnam veterans will tell you, that they never wanted to see another generation of veterans treated the way we were treated when we came home.
Yeah. Well put. Thank you, Jim. Chris Perillo.
In 1973, I was up at Duquesne University, and I had about 3 friends. They were Marines who had done a tour, and they'd come to college on the GI Bill, and they all got into Air Force ROTC. And I said, well, why'd you do that? And they said, because they had all experienced the worst of the military, a war zone, the rigors, and I say this with all kinds of respect, the horrors of the Marine Corps. And they decided they'd like to stay, but they wanted to be officers. They knew better than to go back as enlisted. So they wanted to be officers. And that was like at that point in time, in 1973, 74, that was the path of least resistance. Go to the Air Force. No offense. But no, I swear. And I wonder how many other Marines decided, I'd like to stay, but somewhere get a commission somehow.
Yeah.
And either Navy or Air Force or maybe even Army, I don't know, just to stay in.
What a culture shock to go from Marine Corps to Air Force. Totally different culture.
Well, they wanted to serve, but they wanted to be officers, and I think it was more to get out of the enlisted ranks and into the officers rather than the service they were serving in. And I think they were all successful to my knowledge.
How interesting. Chad.
There's 5 types of discharges: honorable, general, under honorable conditions, other than honorable, dishonorable, and then medical separation.
Okay, medical separation.
That's changed over the years, but that's what it is right now.
That's what it is today. So it's like less than honorable and general are okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I've heard of less than honorable, but I don't see it on the chart today.
Okay. Thank you. Dave Seaver, we're going to give you the last word. We're over time.
There we go. So to what Jim Roberts said, contrary to popular belief, I was not in diapers during the Vietnam War. I was 12 years old when it ended. I remember that. But I remember other things too, like how you guys got treated when you came home, and some of the nonsense that went on. And thank you for protecting the next generations who went to war. I fortunately never had to experience that personally, so I'm grateful for that, and I try to thank every Vietnam veteran I see. I ran into a couple of guys last weekend at the grocery store, and the one guy turned out to be giving me the same experience that your daughters had, Todd. He wanted to talk and talk and talk, but and it was funny because his daughter was waiting for him and she was getting a little toe tappy, impatient with him.
Right.
But yeah, because it's an all volunteer force now. Basically, if you're there, you more or less want to be there. So it's a lot different mentality. I know, a lot of guys didn't want to be there and they had to be, and I appreciate the fact that even though you didn't want to be there, you went and did your duty and
yeah,
eventually, even still now getting the honor that you deserve for that. So just wanted to say thanks for that. And just to touch on it last, you mentioned about the psych patients. Those were some of the toughest ones to deal with. This most recent conflict went on for 20 years. And you had guys who deployed multiple times, and you go down to some of the military bases like down in the Carolinas and Georgia, and you have the camp followers who literally made a living off of marrying those soldiers, divorcing them, and cleaning them out. Yeah, and a lot of those guys, the one that kicked them over the edge was they got that letter from the wife saying, you know what, I'm divorcing you, taking everything, have a nice day kind of stuff. So yeah, those guys, you just felt horrible for them. So
boy, that's a whole subject that we
that's a whole nother story, isn't it?
It is. Yes, it is.
So, because this conflict was different than any other we've been in. Just how we fought it and how things wound up. So
well, thank you, Dave. Thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. I love you all, and I love these conversations. They just absolutely fill my heart and make me think, and I always learn something. And so I'm grateful to all of you, just even if you didn't speak up, if you're just being a part of the conversation tonight. I hope you could join us. Feel free to join us tomorrow night when we talk about our trip to Europe for the World War II Battlefield Store. Thursday night when we talk about gliders in World War II, and then next Monday when we're back with our Jeopardy night. All right. Good night, everybody. Stay safe.